has the best hats.
You should see my wife's collection of hats. It's amazing.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Caffe Lena. Thank you for joining us tonight for another edition of our storytelling night. If this is your first time tuning in to one of these sessions, typically what this is an open mic where we have one featured teller who takes half an hour, and then we have 10-minute slots which are open to our extended community of storytellers. And there are quite a lot of storytellers in the Capital Region, the Adirondacks. So people come from all over to share stories, and they range, there's all types of stories that get told. The one rule is no notes. And you have 10 minutes, and you can do with that what you like. So what we've been doing since we started doing live streams again is rather than having an open mic format, which is difficult right now, we've been having some of the people who have been our featured storytellers for those open mic nights come and take their normal half-hour slots in groups of 3 and make a whole night out of it. So that is what's going to happen again tonight. We have Joe Doolittle starting us off, and then Siri Allison and Barbara Chepaitis. So I hope you have a wonderful night. Please say hello in the comments, in the chat, and let us know where you're watching from. If you are also a storyteller, if you've come and told at these nights before. And also please make sure to visit the virtual tip jar that's going to be on your screen. I'll send it in the chat a few times, but it's how we reward these storytellers for an evening of wonderful stories. So I hope you enjoy the tales, whatever they turn out to be, and have a wonderful night. And with that, here is Joe Doolittle.
Thank you, and thank you for tuning in. And I hope that sometime in the near future you get to come back to Caffe Lena and listen to a musical or a storytelling performance, because it is just a wonderful place, and the memories of all the performers from the 60s on up kind of are here with us, and it's just magical. It would be more magical if you were here live. Since Thanksgiving is just around the corner, I'm going to start with something about Thanksgiving. We gather together to ask the Lord's blessing. He hastens and chastens his will to make known. The wicked oppressing their cease from distressing. The Lord is on our side, he forgets not his own. There are a couple more verses of that song, but let me just interrupt myself here and say something about the song, because we identify that with Thanksgiving and the Pilgrims, because didn't they come from Holland when they came to Plymouth? Yeah. But it's unlikely that they sang that song in New England. You see, you remember they left the Netherlands because they didn't want to speak Dutch. They didn't want their kids speaking Dutch. So it's interesting. And then you know that the next verse, or the last verse, we all do extol thee, thou leader triumphant, and soon to do what a nation should be. And from the beginning, the fight we were winning. The Lord is on our side. Oh, God, make us free. God, make us free. The song, We Gather Together, was written in 1597. And it was written in celebration of the Dutch victory over a significant army under Philip, the King of Spain. And it was not kind of the gathering of, wonderful family love that we kind of equate with it. It was a victory, and it was a song about determination and about staying the course and about victory. And it was a statement of faith. And it was in Dutch. And it was sung in many parts of the Netherlands. It was even sung in church there. Now, a young student from the United States in 1897 was traveling home from Leipzig, where he had studied music, and he was collecting folk songs. And he wrote that song down and translated it into English. And when he got it, he began to sell these publish these songs. And he sold it to the Dutch Reformed Church, the Protestant denomination of which I am a member, because it was actually, they liked the idea that it was Dutch. They hadn't sung it before, but it was now in English, and they started to use it in a hymnal in 1903. Now, the message the song carries is really a firm one for patriotism and for getting through diversity. And the country had to get through the World War I, and then a little bit of the Roaring '20s, and then the Depression. And through that, the popularity of We Gather Together grew. And another Protestant denomination, the Methodists, they published it in their new book of hymnals right in the middle of the Depression. And it was the first hymn. And the hymn resonated. It resonated through World War II. It resonated in the 50s. Somewhere along the way, we grafted it to the story of Thanksgiving. And it carries us. It carries us. Jackie Onassis, when she was feted in her memorial service, used that hymn as the closing hymn, among other famous elements of it. And so if you ever wonder what happens out of the violence of war and the tragedy of war and the stress of modern times, sometimes the human expression of being determined and loving and recognizing the powerful will of an all-guiding spirit can mean quite a bit. And for that, we have a happy Thanksgiving. Thank you. We're here in Saratoga, and every time I come up to tell stories in Saratoga, I like to tell a Saratoga story. And this is one that I call Carrying Warwing. Now, Warwing in Mohawk, Iroquois, translates as he who makes the deals. And it was the Mohawk name for Sir William Johnson, who was an Irish immigrant kid who came over in the 1730s, 40s, took over the land grant from his Admiral Peter Warren, his uncle, and made himself into a land baron and a very famous person in all of history. His first wife died. He married a Mohawk maid, or he didn't really marry Molly Brant, but he had a lot of children with Molly Brant. And his brother, or her brother, Joseph Brant, was his right-arm person in his relationship with the American Indian tribes. And about 1770 or so, Warwing got the gout. And he was just miserable. You couldn't deal with him. You couldn't talk with him. He was painful. And Molly Brant pulled her brother aside. And she says, Joseph, you got to take him to the place of the spirits. Well, in all the time the Iroquois had been doing friendly things with Johnson or any other European, they had never let down the secret of the healing powers of what we know as Saratoga Springs. But at the same time, here was their Lord and Master in unbelievable pain. So they went to Warwing and they said, we're going to take you to this special place, and you will bathe and you will drink and you will have a hot steam bath and you will get better. So they put him in a chair, and 4 braves picked him up, and they carried him from Johnstown all the way over here, and they set up a camp right over there near the Congress Spring. And after the 2nd day of treatment, Johnson was a new man. Another day, he was feeling better than he'd felt in years. And on the 4th day, a message came that was very urgent. He had to go home to Johnstown. And he said, whoops, I'm out of here. And they all went back to Johnstown via Schenectady. He walked from here to Schenectady. And then he got on a horse and rode home. Now, when he got home, after he solved the crisis, he wrote to everybody he knew about the wonderful thing that had happened to him at this Saratoga Springs. Holy crow, the jig was up. And actually, Philip Schuyler, who lived over on the Hudson, he came over and explored and discovered it, but things got a little dicey in the early 1770s, and there was a whole revolution thing going on. And people didn't come here to really check it out because they had other things on their mind. And one of those soldiers that traveled through here was an old man from Connecticut who had actually fought in the French Indian War, quite illustrious in many names. His name was Israel Putnam, and he was the guy in the revolution that said at the Battle of Bunker Hill, "Don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes." Yeah. Well, at any rate, he made it in his 80s all the way through the revolution. And because he was a general, he got to pick where he got his land grant. And when he was fighting at Saratoga, he had heard about the springs. So he picked 300 acres around Saratoga Springs. But age caught up with him, and he couldn't come over and settle it, so he gave it to his nephew, a guy named Gideon Putnam. And Gideon Putnam had a vision for this place. He and Israel had talked. So when he came, he was going to build a hotel, which he did, and he was going to lay out streets for a grand city, a broad main street. And as he started to put other streets out, he named them for his daughters, Caroline and Phyla. And we sit on Phyla Street. Now, I tell you the story because the coincidence of certain things, again, of a stressful, painful thing that was turned into a wonderful cure, that was turned into a story of this will benefit many more people than I am. And I've got an idea that might work for you, Gideon, but I can't do it myself. And when you look at that broad street that runs north to south in this fair city, it's vibrant, it's historic, it's fun, people love it here. People come here from all over the world when there's no threat of disease. So I'd have to say that when Warwing was about to make his deal for Saratoga Springs, he didn't know how fine the deal would actually be. Carrying Warwing. My last story is going to be a story about my family. And if any of them are out there listening, you know that this is almost true. This is almost true. My mother was a Christmas baby. And we were always challenged to get her the right thing. And when the 5 kids were all around, it was hard for her to get recognized at all because it was Christmas. She was the mom, and as try as we did to do special things. I had one brother that gave her an apple pie plate for 12 years. It was a special thing in hopes that she would make apple pie. At any rate, so it was a challenge. And when she was in her early 90s, I went out for breakfast with a new friend who's one of my storytelling partners now, Harlan Rantmeyer. And Harlan I had met when he was our interim minister at First Schenectady, and he was now the chaplain at Albany Met. And so I said to him, Harlan, if you're got nothing else to do, why don't you come to our house for Thanksgiving? He says, oh, that's really nice of you, but I think I'm going to go to the Mathis and I'm going to sit at Jossie's place. Now, the backstory on this is that when he was our interim, some very good friends had a daughter who came home from college and was diagnosed with leukemia. And Harlan was the interim, and he carried that family through almost a year, even after he was back in his home base camp, through the whole episode of transplants and things. And it didn't end well for Jossie. But when we had her memorial service, Harlan came back and did the memorial service. There's a postscript to the story. So I'm there with the story of Jossie's things. I said, how do you know you sat at Jossie's seat? Well, Jan takes everybody's handprint, and she goes around it with a crayon, and then she stitches it on her sewing machine, and then she washes out the crayon so you know, and she dates it so you know who was where when. And they have a table for Thanksgiving and Christmas and Easter, and everybody has their own birthday tablecloth. I said, wow, that's wonderful. So I go home. I say to my wife, I says, hey, look, listen to this. And I'm telling her the story, and she says, we should make one for your mother because we never know how to get her the right present. Oh, that's really good. So we went out and we got a blank tablecloth, blue, your favorite color. And everybody was coming for Thanksgiving dinner, so we got about 70% of the family's hands. And then I started to call and fax and try to recover them all. More came in. About 10 days before Christmas, they had the pattern of the hands all out in calico on this blue, different colors of calico. And she said, you know what we really need here is we need your mother's hands right here in the middle. And they would look really good. I says, that would really look good. She says, well, you got to get them for us. I said, well, how can I get them for you if I break the secret? That's not my problem, she says. So I go over to my mother's apartment and I explain that I'm doing a Christmas project with a Sunday school class and I need the hands of some people that aren't kids. And could I trace her hands? She fell for it. Bingo. So I come home and Gay does her mastery, and there are these arthritic hands in the center of this thing, and meanwhile, she's got everything else kind of fastened down. And people had sent in little notes to her. Happy birthday. You're the best grandmother. You rock, Grandma. Grandma, our family is crazy. It was wonderful. And so we went out for Christmas dinner at my brother Larry, and Larry was a lawyer. He's very proper. Sometimes he was so proper, I almost didn't think he was a Doolittle. And we gave away presents, and then we had our lunch, and then we came back, and we were playing Boggle and games. And then it came time for Mom's birthday cake. And she comes into the dining room, and we're all kind of gathered around, and my brother Larry starts to bounce up and down and say, Mama, what is it? What is it? She says, I'm not sure. She says, it's our hands, Mom. It's all our hands. Happy birthday. And she looked again, and she fingered the hands, and she saw her own hands, and she looked over at Gay, and she said, you did this for me, didn't you? Yes, Mom, I did. Oh, I love you for it. And I love you too, Mom. Now, in my now 50-some odd years of marriage, that's the only time I've ever heard my mother and my wife say that they loved each other. And what's wonderful about the tablecloth, which is behind me here on this piano, is that we've used it as a way of keeping track of who comes into the family. So as people have been married, as grandchildren have come, as people have been adopted, we've added their hands. And we send it around the country when it's needed for some celebration of the family. My mom passed away in 2009 at 105. And I like to think that of all the presents she's gotten, that she liked this one best. I call that song Grandma's Hands. Thank you. Thank you. It was really a pleasure to be here. And again, my wishes for us all is that we're back here for a live performance sometime soon. Siri Allison is a good friend and a teller who's done things in schools and actually has taken on a little bit of producing with the programs over at Fort Salem Theater and Telebration. And it's so wonderful to have you here tonight. Siri Allison.
Okay.
Joe, I wonder how many generations are going to use that tablecloth.
Oh,
hope more than one.
100 years from now. When you get up closer, you can see the calico. I couldn't see that where I was sitting. These are patterned. All right, so I brought 2 stories today. The first one is a Yiddish story that I have loved for a long time, and I thought, it's just too odd to tell it. Well, you'll see. It's kind of an odd story, but I think its day has come, I hope. It was written by a man named Solomon Bloomgarden, who was born in Lithuania in the 1870s, immigrated to the U.S., died in the Bronx in 1927. He was very well known in his day. His pen name was Yehoash, and he was famous as a poet and translator. He translated books of the Bible into Yiddish. And this story was written by him, translated by Nathan Ausubel, and then I have edited and updated it a little and checked that out with my Jewish friends to make sure it's still kosher, which they assure me it is. It takes place in the Jewish section of a larger Eastern European city. All right. Every Jewish community needs a few things, a few certain things. It needs a synagogue, of course. It needs a school. It needs a bathhouse, which I knew nothing about before this story, a ritual bathhouse. It needs a wandering billy goat or 2. And it needs an apikoiros, a free thinker, someone to challenge the religious people and keep them on their toes. And in our town, the apikoiros, the free thinker, was Rabinovich, a middle-aged bachelor and the town's only pharmacist. Well, his pharmacy was situated directly across the street from the synagogue. So when the congregants would pour out after Friday night services, there they would see this contrary fellow sitting on his porch smoking a cigar. And they could have almost tolerated that, but he would greet each one with a hearty and cheerful, "Good Shabbos, good Shabbos." And they got the idea that he wasn't actually wishing them a good Sabbath, but rather sort of taunting them in a way. And it just really got under their skin. And well, they would have avoided him or maybe even excommunicated him, but they couldn't because he was the town's only pharmacist. And he was chock full of medical knowledge besides. Some people said he knew even more than the doctor himself. And they had to admit it, he had a generous heart. When it came time, for example, to provide for the needy at Passover, well, he was the first one to extend a helping hand. And all the poor people knew that they had the standing privilege of coming to him for free medicine whenever they needed it. But at the same time that he measured out your medicine for you, well, he would tease you and scold you and berate you for whatever reason it was that you couldn't pay. And as a consequence, you would leave his shop feeling about 2 inches high. But you would have your medicine. Such a man was Rabinovich. Now, one of his steady customers was a bent old woman named Gitta Nesha. She didn't come for medicine. No, she came because she was always taking up a collection for someone or other. Her children, who lived in America, sent her 8 rubles a month, with which she was able to live comfortably. But no, she scrimped and saved on herself, and then she took those savings and used them as seed money for her collections. And then she'd go house to house, shop to shop, asking for contributions for a bride who needed a dowry or a shopkeeper who needed fresh tools, or sometimes she would say, "I can't tell you for who, but it's important." And people would always give her a little something. Had to be a little something because they knew that tomorrow she would come around asking for a little something more. They would give her a little something, and with it, their blessing. "May you live to be 120, Gitta Nesha." And she would smile and say, "Well, 120, I don't know, but when God calls me, I'll be ready. And by ready, she meant that 10 years earlier she had sewed her own burial shroud and took it out of its drawer once a month to shake out the wrinkles and give it a good airing. Now, she came to Rabinovich often, and he always gave her a little something. Oh, but not with his blessing. No, with aggravation. He would tease her. He would say things like, "Gidenesha, today I'm giving you a whole half a kopeck, and for that I want you to go and fetch me the egg of a stork." And everyone knew a stork was an unclean bird. You weren't supposed to touch anything about it. Or he would say, "Now, today, Gidenesha, I have a kopeck for you and one for me. You know what I'm going to do with mine? I'm going to go buy some bacon. Don't you want to taste it?" And she would stand there not really knowing how to take this teasing. And then he would laugh at her confusion until she would say, "Gewalt, Pani Rabanovich, have God in your heart. What will you do when the day of judgment arrives?" And he would say, "The day of judgment, bring it on." And she would leave just shaking her head. Such a jewel of a man, and yet what a scoffer. Well, the grief that all this caused Gidenesha turned to genuine heartache when news got around town that Rabinovich had desecrated God's holy name in a truly terrible and blasphemous way. You see, Beryl the tailor had been waiting in line to pay at the pharmacy when he overheard Rabinovich sell his share of paradise. In other words, he sold his portion of heaven, his portion of life in the world to come, his Jewish soul, in essence. He had sold it to the town priest for 2 rubles. This was a slap in the face, a repudiation of everything his community stood for. Of course, it was a scandal. The gossip went around and around and around, but Gidenesha, she felt as if a thunderbolt had hit her in the head. She had grown fond of this apikoiros. And now, God in heaven, what was he going to do without the tiniest bit of the world to come? She tried to console herself with the thought that, his generous deeds would come to his aid in the hour of final reckoning, but no, not even they could outweigh this sacrilege. She worried, she wept all day. That night, what a dream she had. She dreamt that she saw Rabinovich cringing under the rod of the avenging angel, and somewhere there was laughter at this punishment, and looking around, there it was Rabinovich again. He was laughing. He was balancing himself on the tip-top of the church steeple, his burial shroud billowing out behind him. In one hand he held a stork, and with the other he was flinging bacon, spewing it over the town, and the priest was doing cartwheels in the air around the steeple. She woke, shaking, didn't sleep all night. But by the time she stumbled out of bed the next morning, in her heart there had sprung up a heroic resolve. She was going to save the unfortunate pharmacist from the torments of the world to come. She was going to take up a collection. She herself would be happy, she thought, happy to donate 1/10 of her share of paradise. And for the rest, she would find good people and get them to donate a little of their paradise to him. And so began her labors of collecting fragments of paradise for this blaspheming apikoiros Rabinovich. Well, at first, People laughed at her. They said, "Whoever heard of giving away paradise unto such a sinner?" And truth be told, no one was quite sure of how much paradise they actually had. And then, to go and give away a part of it. But Gidenesha pleaded, and she wept, and she described her dream, which she embellished with several terrible visions that she herself had cooked up. And in the end, people gave. This one 100th part of her share of celestial paradise, this one 1,000th. Now, she patiently, tirelessly collected this over a year, carrying a paper around with her and writing down the contributions while she was collecting for other things. But she didn't add them up. No, not until the year anniversary of that awful day. And when she added them, she found to her great relief and joy that she had found a full portion for him, for which even a saint would not even have to be ashamed. Oh, she went to bed so satisfied, woke up the next morning glowing. With light, almost girlish steps, she hurried to the pharmacy, opened the door, her heart beating like a hammer under her lean ribs. "Pani Rabanovich," she called out, "I have come to salute you with a mazel tov." "What? Am I getting married?" That's what he said, but she didn't hear his little joke. No, because it was no laughing matter. In her hand, she held the fate of a human soul. "Pani Rabanovich, I have for a long time been making a collection, and people had pity on you, and each one gave whatever he could." "A collection? For me?" "Yes, for you. Jews are a compassionate people. Know that I have gathered for you a full share of bliss in the world to come." Bliss? 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 What is that? Bliss? Bliss in the world to come? Bliss in the world to come? Oh, you people, bliss in the world to come. He laughed. He laughed and laughed and laughed until the tears ran down his cheeks. Gidenesha just stood there. There was nothing to say, nothing to do. With the tears running down her own cheeks, she turned and shuffled out of the pharmacy. And that is the end of the story, as Yehoash wrote it. And that's the reason I couldn't tell it, because what an ending. Oh my goodness, right? So abrupt and such a end like that. So I was running this story by Jim Brule, who some of you may know. He's an ordained Jewish storyteller, and he assured me that the details that I had updated were fine and kosher. But then he says, "So why do you want to tell this story?" And I said, "Well, because I think it's so relevant to today and the way we treat each other. People are bringing ideas or something they've thought and what they, and the other side just shuts them down, just doesn't even listen. And this story just illustrates what a dead end that is." And then I described to him some of the ideas that my friends and I had for how, you might say, well, this happened and that made it better for Gidenesha. He goes, "No, I don't think so. But do think about this," he said. "It's not only Gidenesha that was sad in this way, because she brought him a gift without even considering who he was. The thing she brought made zero sense. It was just nonsense to him. So she didn't even think about the world he lived in as she tried to bring it." And the other thing he said is, "How does this story start?" I say, "Okay, well, every Jewish community needs a synagogue, a school, a bathhouse, a billy goat, an apikoiros." "Ah," he said, "every Jewish community needs an apikoiros, according to this story. So if she had come and managed to pull him back into the fold, well, he wouldn't have been quite the Apikoiros that he was. And according to the author, he needed to be there. They needed to have the two sides. But I just think it's really sad that they couldn't meet. So that's that story. I have another one. Yeah. Yes, I felt that, but I thought, well, you would put it there, so I would leave it. Thank you. All right. So this is a story, a similar theme, but this one, like Joe's last story, is about me. my life in 1987. My husband, Michael, and I were living in a studio apartment on East 18th Street in New York City. Living in a studio apartment, you want to get out every once in a while. And on the weekends, to get out, I would go for a little run. Not a serious run, but just, to get out and have some fresh air and movement. And this was the end of April or beginning of May. I think it was a beautiful, warm, sunny day, totally unlike what we in Saratoga have out there tonight. The first day, I remember it was warm enough to wear shorts. So here I go in my little shorts. I'm out the door. And the place to go running was from 18th Street, East River Park. So you would walk downtown until you got to 12th Street, walk east until you got to this ramp that went up on a bridge over FDR Drive, which is a very busy highway. And then the ramp came down into the park. And you would come down, and there was this swath of green along the East River. So there was the river, the sidewalk, and the green, within which were basketball courts and a baseball diamond and those grills that are anchored to the ground. Really nice place. So if you continue over, then there's FDR Drive, and beyond that, Avenue D, Avenue C, Avenue B, and A. Well, A and B in 1987 were kind of funky East Village, but C and D at that time were not a safe neighborhood. There was gangs and drug dealers. So the proximity of this park to those avenues meant that this park didn't have a reputation as the safest park. But, there were families at the grills and teenagers playing basketball. As long as there were people there, I felt fine. It was safe. I just knew that I needed to keep my wits about me if I saw something unusual, and I needed to be where the people were. Well, this Saturday, I'm over the ramp and down, and I start running down the sidewalk. There's nobody in the park. Kind of eerie. I think, well, maybe it's early. Maybe they'll come soon. I'll just keep going. So I kept on running when all of a sudden I tripped and splat, I fell. Now, I'm glad there's nobody there to see me do such an embarrassing thing. Well, I pick myself up and, oh, no, I've cut my knee. Not badly, but enough so that there's blood pouring down my leg into my little white socks and my little white sneakers. And, well, so that's the end of my run for the day. I turn to go home. But by the time I get to that access ramp, my leg is still pouring blood because I've still been walking on it, right? So I don't really want to walk through the streets of Manhattan with my leg pouring blood, but I think, well, I can elevate it because directly across from the access ramp is this kind of patio plaza little area. In my memory, it's like a half circle. I've been back to look for it, but they've renovated the park. I can't find it. So there's cobblestones and brick, and then there are benches and a fence, and beyond that, the East River. So you're almost at the river. But I can go over there and put my leg up on the bench to elevate it. So that's what I did. But there's still nobody in the park. Oh, yes, there is. Here coming towards me is a homeless man. Remember, I said it's a warm day, but he has on a hat, a scarf, 2 or 3 coats. He's got, a lot of overstuffed plastic bags. I'm not, on principle, afraid of homeless people. I knew several in the neighborhood. I was just about to do some plays in homeless shelters. But I didn't know this guy. I didn't know his mental state. So here he is walking towards me, wearing all those coats on a warm day. Well, what's he going to do? He doesn't have another place to put his coats, but still, it's odd. And I think, well, I could run up the access. Well, that would be rude. I can't do that. So I just stay here. And here he comes towards me. He says, Would you like some Kleenex? Oh, okay, thank you, I say. And he digs around in those pockets and he pulls out a generous wad of Kleenex and gives it to me. Thank you, I say. Oh, yeah, he says, sure, I always have this with me. The places I go, I need it. And he turns and walks away. So I'm mopping up my leg. I don't know where he's gone. I don't see anybody else in the park. Yes, here's somebody coming from kind of far away on the sidewalk, an odd gait. And for some reason, I think about that beyond there is the Lower East Side, where mafia types, push each other into the river with cement over shoes. And then I realize that why I'm thinking that is he's got this tan trench coat and a black hat and black pants and black shoes, and he's carrying this black case. It's too big to be a briefcase. Doesn't look like an overnight bag. In the movies, it would have in it a Tommy gun, or $1 million in unmarked bills. It's just this odd case, and he's walking straight towards me. He's not smiling. And then he comes right up to me and he goes, would you like some antibiotic cream? True story. So I say, oh, okay, thank you. And he opens this case. There's a trumpet in there, of course. No Tommy gun. Has a little compartment, squeezes some antibiotic cream on my finger. He says, oh, I'm so tired. I've been up all night playing my horn. And he leaves up the access ramp. So I'm putting the cream on my knee. It's looking a little better, stopping bleeding. Oh, there's a family way down there. Oh, whoosh, here comes down the access ramp this huge dude on this huge bicycle. Black leather, silver study things. I don't know whether he actually had skull and crossbones on this jacket, but that was the sort of feeling I had. This really tough guy with spiky hair, and I think, oh, I guess I hope he won't see me. But no, he does see me, and he stops, right blocking my access, puts his foot down, so he stopped his bike, and he's still towering over me. And I'm thinking, oh, I'm on his turf. I really shouldn't be here. Oh, and he says to me, would you like a Band-Aid? I said, no, I don't really need a Band-Aid. He says, sure you do. And he zips open his bike pouch, and he hands me a Band-Aid. Thank you, I said. Sure, he says, anytime. And he zooms away on his bike. By now, my leg is quite respectable. I limp home. I tell Michael what happened. I say, who were those people? And then, believe it or not, I forget all about it for like 20 years. And then Michael reminds me, oh yeah, that really happened. And I know it really happened because he's the one telling me. It's not like I'm remembering a dream or something. And I think, wow, that was something. Who were those guys? And I bet they don't even remember that day. But I remember it because they gave me much more than Kleenex and a Band-Aid. Those little mercies of theirs bridged this gap of fear that I had set between us. And I think that's really something to remember. And that's the end of that story. Our next teller is Barbara Chepaitis. I love Barbara's stories. She is one of the most creative tellers I know. She's also a writer. I have one of her books that's just wonderful, and a teacher. So Barbara.
Thank you, Siri. Don't fall. Not now. We don't have any Band-Aids. Right. Okay, let me get myself set up. Try not to hurt myself. What are the odds that we'd have 2 Lithuanian stories in one night, right? And if my friends in Uzupis, my cousin Tomas is listening, this is for you, I guess. Labas bisulis. I hope I didn't mangle that word too much. The first story I'm going to tell you is, there are a lot of different versions of it from many different countries. This is the Lithuanian version, and Lithuanians love their trees, and their trees are sacred to them. And this story is called The Juniper Tree. It's also kind of about a sort of family dinner thing. And I thought it'd be good for you to think of that, those of you who can't have your family dinners this Thanksgiving. This may remind you of the good side of that. Once there was a man and a woman who were married and who loved each other very much and were very happy with each other. But they had one sorrow. They had no children, and she wanted a child very badly. One day in winter, she went out to stand by the juniper tree in their front yard. And as she stood there, she peeled an apple. And she looked at the tree, and she cut her finger. So a few drops of blood fell into the snow. And she looked at it and said, "Oh, how I wish I had a baby, white as snow and red as blood." And the tree shivered as she said that. And she went inside and felt comforted. And the next month, the snow melted. And in the second month, the grass grew green again. And in the third month, the flowers began to bloom. And in the fourth month, the leaves came back to the trees, and the little birds sang. And in the fifth month, berries swelled on the branches of the trees. And she said, "Ah," and was quite still. And in the sixth month, she ate the berries and was sad and sorrowful. And in the seventh month, she stood under the juniper tree, and her heart leaped with joy. And in the eighth month, she said to her husband, "If I should die, bury me beneath the juniper tree." And in the ninth month, she did have a baby, white as snow and red as blood, a little boy. And she was so happy, she died. Don't blame me for that line, okay? I'm just telling the story, and that's the way the story goes. Right there, she was so happy, she died. Her husband was inconsolable, and so he remarried. And his new wife had a little girl. So the two children grew up together, and they were fast friends. They got along very well. But the mother began to think of her husband's wealth and how if she didn't have this other child, which wasn't hers, all of his money would go to her daughter, Marjorie, little Marjorie. And evil things began to happen inside her heart as she thought of this. And she was not very nice to the little boy. She would always scold him. She would just smack his ears now and then. She would call him names. She gave him no peace at all. Now, one day when the children were a little older, they came home from school, and the little boy said to his mother, "Mother, may I have an apple?" And she said, "Yes, you may." And bad things were happening inside her heart. As she said it, she said, Go over there and get it out of the box. Yeah, like that. Lift the lid up. It's heavy." He lifted the lid up. She said, "Oh, I'll help you." And she held it for him while he picked out an apple. And then she slammed it down hard on his head. She slammed it so hard his head fell off. That was not really what she intended, but she had an idea how to figure this out, how to fix this. And she propped the boy up on the couch, and she put his head kind of back on and put a scarf around it to hold it there. A little while later, Marjorie came in and said, "Mother, may I have an apple?" And she said, "Yes, get one for your brother, too." So she picked out 2 apples, and she said, "Here, brother, come and get your apple." He didn't move. "Brother, get your apple." Nothing. "Brother, your apple." Nothing. So she said, "Oh, I'll just toss it to you." And she tossed it, and she hit him in the head, and his head fell off. "Oh, what have I done? What have I done? Oh, no, no, no." And the mother was very pleased about this. She said, "Oh, don't worry about it. I'll take care of everything. You go outside with your apple. And Marjorie went and sat by the juniper tree, and she wept, and she wept, and she wept, and she wept. Meantime, the mother made dinner. Oh, yes, I told you it would make you think twice about those family dinners. And she made a nice stew. Had a lot of bones in it, but it was a nice stew. And when her husband came home, he said, "What smells so good? Why, that smells like a great stew." She said, "Yes, sit down and have some. So he did. He sat down. He started eating the stew. And she said, "Marjorie, come have your dinner." And Marjorie came to the table, but she couldn't eat. She sort of slunk under the table and was cried and cried. And the father's going, this is great, this is great. And the mother's going, have some more. And Marjorie's like, come on, we've all had family dinners like that, right? Remember some Thanksgivings from time past. And the stew was all gone, and the father kept kind of throwing the bones under the table. And Marjorie gathered them up, and she laid them beneath the juniper tree. And when she did that, the tree shivered. And suddenly, at the top, a bird appeared, beautiful bird. And her heart felt soothed, and she went back in the house. Now the bird flew away, flew all across the town, and it stopped first at the goldsmith's, and the goldsmith was making a beautiful gold chain. And the bird sang a song. Goes like this. I'll sing it slowly so you can remember it, and then you can sing it at your family celebrations, okay? You'll hear it a number of times. I'm sure you'll get it. Oh, my mother, she killed me. My father, he ate me. My sister is little Marjorie. She gathered my bones and laid them beneath the juniper tree. What a beautiful bird I am. And the goldsmith said, "Why, that's a wonderful song. Sing it again." And the bird, like any good singer or storyteller, said, "I sing it once for free. Second time, you got to pay me." Goldsmith said, "What can I give you?" "The chain, the beautiful gold chain." And the goldsmith said, "Done." So the bird sang the song again. Sing it at home, kids. Oh, my mother, she killed me. My father, he ate me. My sister is little Marjorie. She gathered my bones and laid them beneath the juniper tree. What a beautiful bird I am. And the goldsmith put the chain around the bird's neck, and the bird flew away. Next place he stopped was the cobbler's house. And the cobbler was sitting outside making a pair of beautiful red shoes. And the bird sang his song. Oh, my mother, she killed me. My father, he ate me. My sister is little Marjorie. She gathered my bones and laid them beneath the juniper tree. What a beautiful bird I am. Don't forget the walk part. That's the best part. And the cobbler said, "What a lovely song. Sing it again." "I sing it once for free. Second time, you have to pay me. I could give you these shoes." And the bird said yes, and sang it again, and took the shoes and flew away. Next place he stopped was at the miller's house. And the miller was sort of carving out a new millstone for his mill. And the bird sang a song. Oh, my mother, she killed me. My father, he ate me. My sister is little Marjorie. She gathered my bones and laid them beneath the juniper tree. What a beautiful bird I am. And the miller said, "I love that song. Sing it again." "I sing it once for free. Now you have to pay me. All I have is this millstone." And the bird said, "I'll take that." And he put it around his neck, and he flew away. Sang the song again, of course. And he flew to the house of little Marjorie and what was left of her family. And Marjorie was still sort of shooken up. The mother was plotting and planning. Dad was just sitting in the easy chair full from all that supper. And they heard a bird singing. And it was a beautiful song, one went like this. Oh, my mother, she killed me. My father, he ate me. My sister is little Marjorie. She gathered my bones and laid them beneath the juniper tree. What a beautiful bird I am. And the father said, wow, what a beautiful song that is. And Marjorie said, yes, it is. I'm going to go outside and see if I can see the bird that's singing it. And she went outside, and there on the roof was that beautiful bird. And from its beak, it sort of dropped down a pair of beautiful red shoes for her. And she put them on. And he sang the song again, and she danced. Oh, my mother, she killed me. My father, he ate me. My sister is little Marjorie. She gathered my bones and laid them beneath the juniper tree. What a beautiful bird I am. And Marjorie danced and danced, and she felt so much better. All the sadness was lifted from her heart. She went back in the house. And she showed her father the shoes. She said, you should go out there. You should go out there, Father, and see that bird. And he did, and the bird is still singing. He's looking up at the bird, and he said, what a beautiful bird you are. And he said, I know. What a beautiful bird I am. And he sort of ducked down, and he dropped that chain. And it landed right around that man's neck. And his heart felt good when that happened. And he went back inside. But inside, the mother was not feeling so good. She had this like inside poison ivy or something, you know. She just felt all uncomfortable, and like things weren't right, and nothing was right, and nothing was good anymore. And and the bird kept singing. Oh, my mother, she killed me. My father, he ate me. My sister is little Marjorie. She gathered my bones and laid them beneath the juniper tree. What a beautiful bird I am. And the mother thought, I'm going to go out there and see if I can find a stone to throw at that bird. And she went outside, and she said, there it is on the roof. And the bird bent down his head, and that millstone fell right on top of her, and she was gone. She was gone. And the juniper tree shivered, and there, standing under it, was Marjorie's brother. Everyone's so relieved when we get to that part. And they went back inside, and they ordered pizza. Thank you. Yes, it is a strange, strange story. One of the stories of my people. I'm going to tell another one now. This from the other side of my family. My mom's side of the family was Italian. My dad's side was Lithuanian. It was truly considered a mixed marriage. In fact, they tell the story of their first Thanksgiving together, you know, all of the family, that my Lithuanian grandmother sat next to my father, and my Italian grandmother sat next to my mother, and she's saying to her daughter in Italian, look at your husband. What's the matter with his eyes? He looks like a frog. And the Lithuanian grandmother is saying to her son, why is your wife so skinny? Where are her breasts? So I really did. But ultimately, they got along okay. They learned to respect each other, I guess is a good way of putting it. And on the Italian side, our holiday traditions were slightly different than other people in the neighborhood. So I'm going to tell you some of that. It starts with a song. See if I can do this after the bird song. Yes, we'll find out. Mille cherubin in coro ti sorridano dal ciel, una dolce canzone t'accarezza il crin, una manti guida lieve fra le nuvole d'or, sognando e vegliando per te, mio tesoro, proteggendo fa il tuo cammin. Dormi, dormi, sogna piccolo amor. Dormi, dormi, sogna piccolo tesoro. Chiudi gli occhi, ascolti gli angioletti. Dormi, 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 piccolo amor. You may applaud. Isn't that a lovely song? It's a lullaby. It's a lullaby, and loosely translated, it means 1,000 angels sang when you were born. And they helped guide you through the clouds to hear, kissing your forehead, singing for you, and they continue to protect you as you walk on your path in life. So sleep, my little love, sleep and dream. Sleep and dream. Close your eyes and listen to the angels. Sleep and dream, my little love. I would like to say my mother sang that to me when I was growing up, but she actually sang this song. Sriracha, sriracha, scugira lucchici na faccia, sriracha, sriracha, scugira lucchici na faccia. Também ela voz. Passa di gente di passa di papa e dice, "Ehi, questo è figlio me." Which, loosely translated, means, back and forth, what do we do with the baby? Throw him in a ditch. Throw him in a ditch. The people pass by, and the papa passes by and says, "Hey, that's my kid." It's interesting growing up with an Italian mother, and at no time is it more interesting than at Christmas. Christmas traditions in Italy were, at that time, very different than American traditions. My mother remembers her mother calling her to the window when she was quite young and saying, "Vieni qui, Teresine. What are they doing down at the O'Brien's house? They're dragging a dead tree in their house." Because they didn't have a Christmas tree tradition. And we always had those little kind of aluminum things. They also did not have Santa Claus. Not at all. They had someone else to bring gifts. La Befana, the Christmas witch. They say she's old as dirt. They say she grew up from the earth, from the dirt itself, and became Befana long before there was Christmas. They say she lived in a little house in the southern part of Italy with 13 cats and one very nervous little bird named Ucciolina, which means nervous little bird. And they say it was her job every year to turn the earth back toward the sun. She'd get out her broom and she'd sweep, scoop, 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 during the darkest time of the year, which we're going into right now, until this old earth turned its face back to the sun. And that's why they called her Befana, which means epiphany. Now, one year, Befana was busy doing just this, scoopa, 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 doing her job, when down the road came walking a whole bunch of people. People in rags, people in very good clothes, people on horses, people walking, people hobbling on crutches. And she said, "Que fa? What's happening?" And they said, "Befana, haven't you heard? A magic child has been born who will save us all. We're going to bring gifts. You should come." I'm busy. Scoop, 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 scoop. She had a job to do, and she kept at it. But after a while, she heard a funny sound up in the sky, and she looked up, and there were angels there. There were angels in the sky. Oh, meeny, 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 meeny. Please make that noise at home. Meeny, 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 like that. I like the way Joe does it, don't you? The big angels. And she said, Kefa, because there were hundreds of angels. There were thousands of angels. I mean, angels, we have herds on high. Okay, I had to. Kefa, she said to them. Befana, haven't you heard? A sacred child has been born who will help us all. We're going to go bring gifts. You should come. Busy. Scoop, 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 scoop. She had work to do. And she kept at it. After a while, she looked down the road and oh no, it was men on elephants. 3 wise guys riding like elephants and things and camels and things. And she said, Kefa. And they said, Befana, haven't you heard? A very special child has been born who will teach us all about love. We're going to bring gifts. You should come. I'm busy. Scoop, 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 scoop. And she kept at it, sweeping and sweeping and sweeping and sweeping. Until one day, and you know this day, one day, she noticed there was just a little more light. Just a little more light in the day. And she knew that for one more year, we would turn back toward the sun and be warm and rejoice again. And her job was done. She thought about it. Maybe they're all right. When a baby's born, you bring some gifts. So if she was anything like my grandmother, she went inside and she started cooking. And she made some pasta, and she made some meatballs, and she made some brajol, and she made some zuppa, and she made some bread, and she made some raviolis and gnocchis, and she made some cookies, and she made some cakes, and she made some pies. And she put them all in a box. And she started to follow those tracks. And believe me, after the elephants, there were a lot of things to follow. When you're as old as dirt, you're never in a hurry. By the time she got to that place where the child had been born, she could see that someone had been there, but no one was left. They had all moved on. If you think that worried Befana, then you don't know her. What she said was, there's a village down the road. There'll be babies there. For all I know, any one of them could be the sacred child who will save the world. I'll give my gifts to them. And so it is. From then till now, Befana brings her gifts not on Christmas, but on the Epiphany, Little Christmas. And she gives them to all the children because there are no bad children in Italy. Let's face it. And because for all she knows, any one of them could be that sacred child who will bless the world. It could be you. It could be you. It could be you. And Joe, it could even be you. And that's my story. Thank you.